How's it going, Crusaders, and welcome back to another sermon. Today, we're going over worldliness, and to be honest with you, I've been talking about worldliness for basically the entirety of 2024, so I kind of feel like I've already done a sermon on this, just because I have been talking about it all year. But nonetheless, I do want to do a sermon on this and just make a whole video about this, because even though, like I said, I have been talking about it all year, I haven't dedicated a video to doing it, so I feel like a sermon would be perfect to do on this subject. So, this is who we are. This is what we've been taught. This is what we have learned since opening our eyes. This is humans, worldliness. So basically, we're talking about, things of this world, possessions, emotions, wants, needs, desires, all things that make us who we are. And, sadly, a lot of the time, it is a bad thing. We see the world as a place where essentially our goal is to be number one at whatever it is our desire leads us to. And, a couple of examples on that, I like music, so my goal is to be a famous songwriter, and that's the only thing that matters to me. Or, I like football, so I want to be in the NFL, and that's all I'm going to care about. Or, let's switch it up a little bit. My life hasn't gone the way I wanted it to, so I'm depressed. Or, my job absolutely sucks, so I'm going to be frustrated every day until I die. Or I have a super nice car, so I'm better than everybody who drives something cheaper. Or, man, on the opposite side of that, man, I want that car so badly, I'd do anything to have it, that I'm going to be upset for the rest of the day that I don't. And personally, that last one sounds exactly like myself. And, I know it sounds like I'm just naming off a bunch of random stuff that are completely different Crusaders, but on the contrary, they could not be similar. And that's because they're all worldly things that we let get to us, that we let change us, that we let control us. And, some of these things occasionally destroy us because we put so many things of this world above Christ. So today we're going to check out 3 Bible verses, as always, to see how we can change that through the Word of God and how He wants us to deal with things of the world. Not the way we do it, because obviously it's not the correct way. So, firstly, we're going to check out Mark 4:18 through 20. Title of the verses, The Sower's Seed. And this is a very good couple of verses that I really want us to pay attention to. And these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word, and the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things entering in, choke the word, and it become unfruitful. And these are they which are sown on good ground, such as hear the word and receive it, and bring forth some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. So here we're looking at, preoccupied people. Those among thorns allow legitimate matters, which here he says cares of this world, and illegitimate matters, which he's saying deceitfulness of riches and the lust of other things, to take priority over the gospel. And, some people, which they're saying good ground, hear and receive, which means take to heart, the gospel, which bears the fruit of faith, obedience, and fidelity in them. So, you know, and this is everybody, and this is myself as well. As I say every single sermon, just because I'm doing a sermon on something does not mean I'm better than anybody at this. It's just that I want to voice my opinion on this and what God is speaking through me to say to you Crusaders. So, we allow this world to take so much from us, Crusaders. Our time, our energy, our patience, our livelihood, our happiness, and we do everything to give the world what it wants. But what do we do for Jesus Christ? Now just pause for a second and really think about that. I challenge all of you, when you lay down tonight to pray, and yes, you should pray every single night before bed. Before you do, I want you to think about what you did to please the world today, what you did to please somebody else today, and what you did to please, just the world today, and what you did to please Jesus today. And see how those stack up, and see if it's remotely close, or does it look something like this. And that's where I really want you to understand that you're pleasing the world, you're not pleasing Jesus, and that needs to be looked at, and that needs to be fixed. Regardless if you're just giving God 5 minutes of your day, which is so minuscule, it needs to happen, because if you go all day without giving Jesus even a second, why should he give you even a second? So really think about that, guys. Now we're going to jump over to our second Bible verse. And this is coming from 1 John 2:15 through 17. And this is a great title of verses, especially for this sermon. Love the Father, not the world. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So when they're saying love not the world, this is a command implying that action now in progress must cease. Stop loving the world. There is, of course, one sense in which Christians should love the world, since God himself did and does, and you can read that in John 3:16, which we've been doing a lot of going over John 3:16. We did it in the Bible study this week. That was the Bible verse for the question of the week, and now we're checking it out in the sermon. So this whole week, in every single video, we have came across John 3:16 has been a part of that. And I think that means something. So, but in a sense of pledging personal loyalty and devotion of one's whole being, it means Christians are to love God first and foremost. So when they're talking about world, and for John, signifies the evil desire and sin so much a part of human existence. And that is absolutely true. As I said in, I believe it was the last video, we sin, and I don't even want to get into everything that comes with sin, but I'm just going to say sin instead of the 100 other things that I can say instead of sin. But we sin so casually and so just naturally now that we don't even see that we're doing it. And that's a huge problem, Crusaders. So, we look at the world and we see it as a opportunity to better our lives, to be who we want to be, to do what we want to do, to follow the desires of our ego and protect that at all cost. And that's the only thing that matters. We need to look at the world as a mission statement from Jesus Christ, telling us to spread his word, teach his message, abide in his word by living in his word. You know, we need to be on the hustle every day to talk to someone about God and potentially save a soul from eternity in hell. Now, I want you to just picture for a second, you know, you have passed away and it is Judgment Day. And, you know, I know it's not something you want to think about, but I do want you to do that for a second. And I want you to imagine standing before God on Judgment Day and Him telling you, you know, my son or my daughter. You know, 2 people will enter the kingdom of heaven because you told them about Jesus. Can you imagine hearing that? Can you imagine the feeling that you will feel hearing that? So, you know, regardless if it's 2 people, if it's 20 people, if it's 200 people, it's not enough because you're going to wish so badly you told more people about Jesus. You know, you can't tell Jesus, you know, I had a Ferrari. Does that mean anything? You know, I had a mansion. Does that mean anything? I had 70 Rolexes. Does that mean anything? He ain't going to care about anything besides who you told about Jesus. His son that died on the cross for all of us. And that's the only thing that's going to matter, you know. You can do 100 different things that you think are pleasing Jesus, but unless you're telling someone about Jesus and trying to save them genuinely and truthfully and purely, it doesn't matter. You're pleasing yourself. You're not pleasing Jesus. And you know, I want you to really let that resonate. So, you know, instead of playing video games 5 days a week, why don't you talk to someone about God? You know, instead of going to a bar with your buddies, why don't you have a Bible study with them? Instead of going fishing every single weekend, why don't you get into church? You know, can you imagine your friends with someone for 10, 15, 20, 30 years? Somebody you call your best friend, your brother, your sister, whatever the case may be. But never once did you think about their soul and where they're going to spend eternity. But yet you called that person your best friend, your brother, your sister, someone that you couldn't spend the rest of your life without. But you never once thought about their soul, their eternity, or where they're going to be when they die. Just something to think about, Crusader. So, you know, I want us to follow that mission statement. We also need to view the world as a battleground. And I've mentioned this multiple times, putting on the armor of God daily to protect God's word, to protect our fellow Christians from ridicule. And, you know, those matter so much. But the main thing is to protect the future of children by telling them about Jesus before the world gets to them first. You know, and finally, and this has a lot to do with everything that we're talking about today, look at the world as a proving ground, not just a battleground, but a proving ground that you will do any and everything God asks of you to show the world what He's done for you, and simply but truthfully show them Jesus through you. And I think that is the main thing to look at when you look at everything that we've talked about today. That is the main point right there. So now we're going to jump over to our last and final Bible verse of the day. And this is coming from Matthew 16:26. Title of the verse: Jesus prepares His disciples. For what is a man And I keep saying this, but it's true. Listen to this verse and think about it and resonate on it. And I keep saying that, but we're looking at a couple different verses in the Gospels today, and it's Jesus speaking, and that's why it hits it home for me, because these are the words of Jesus Christ. And he's not just talking to who he's talking to in this book, he's talking to each and every single one of us. For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? You can't buy your way to heaven, Crusaders. So, I want to end this on a high note, because we all live in the world, and we all try to please the world and others and everything that's in the world, but we never stop and think about what pleases God. And that's the main thing I want to take away from this worldliness sermon, is that we need to do more pleasing to God and less pleasing to the world. We cannot take anything in this world with us besides people. And the only way we can take people with us is if we tell them about Jesus Christ, the man that came to this world and put himself on the cross, took our place, and just let them know that there is a man that loves them more than anybody else in this world ever could, and his name is Jesus Christ. So, very simply put, you can have everything in this world, and you can do what the world says you should. You can follow this world to hell. You can put off Jesus. You can put off church. You can put off Bible study. You can forget about talking about Jesus. But this is the one thing I want you to take away from this video. Everything that we've talked about. Everything that this world has to offer. You can have everything in this world. But as Matthew 16:26 says, you can have everything in this world, but if you don't have Jesus, you have nothing. And remember that, Crusaders. So please, today, take this sermon as a wake-up call to do something to benefit spreading the word of Jesus. Tell someone about Jesus today. Talk to your friends about Jesus. I don't care how whack it sounds to talk about Jesus to somebody. You got no problem talking about the weather, who won the football game, what we're going to do this weekend, but will you stop and think for a second of where they're going to spend eternity? So please, Crusaders, go out today and tell someone about Jesus. This was the sermon on worldliness, and I hope it helps somebody out. Thanks, Crusaders.